there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. There's masculinity, and then there's a toxic lack of evolved masculinity. So I think when we talk about toxic masculinity, it's really damaging for women because women internalize that there is a type of masculinity that's toxic and therefore begin to unconsciously become afraid of all masculinity, when in reality what we're really talking about is like this boyish, underdeveloped, like, same with like the bad boy and the wild man. We're talking about this like very infantile, undeveloped sense of self that's very ego-based and can therefore become violent, because a weak man is always going to have a bad relationship with his ego because he has low self-worth. Whereas like a strong man who's very firm in his masculine energy is going to make you feel safe.
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest, Isabella Beham, on the Tour for This Shit podcast. I'm your host, Angie. If you like the show, don't forget to tell a friend, give it a 5-star rating and a review. You can also subscribe for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Radio FM, Amazon Music, or wherever you are listening to it right now. The more you do that, the more it helps listeners discover this show, the more it's helping me. So I really, really appreciate. Please go do that. Go do that. Thank you. So today with Isabella, who's a matchmaker and a love recruiter, we talk about the difference about being bad and being wild. And this conversation took me places I didn't expect to have today. Okay, we went deep and I absolutely loved it. So without further ado, help me give a big, warm welcome to the beautiful and soulful Isabella. Let's begin. Welcome, Issy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Can't complain.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I am really excited to have you on and talk about being wild and being bad and what the difference is. So, because after we connected, you put a post up around being about wild man and bad boys. And I was like, wait, we got to talk about that instead of the topic that, that we thought we were going to do. So before we dive in, please introduce yourself, where you live and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Isabella and I'm originally from Florida, but I live in Mexico City. And I'm a matchmaker and love recruiter.
What's the difference between a matchmaker and a love recruiter?
Yeah, so if you think of a matchmaker, they're the ones who are doing a lot of the client-facing work, but they typically have, let's say, like 50 clients at a time. So imagine having to find 50 dates for 50 clients every single month. Mm-hmm. The amount of work that would go into that. I mean, think of just planning one date for yourself. So I just started recruiting for matchmakers. I just decided to be a love scout. I kind of made it up. And I was a matchmaker at the time. So I knew how overwhelmed I was with 50 plus clients. And I knew that matchmakers needed some help. And I love recruitment. I'm just kind of a natural networker. So I started helping matchmakers find dates, and it was such a needed service. And, for my friends as well, they didn't know that there was this dating hack where they could get set up by a matchmaker without having to pay. So, the way it works is clients pay their matchmakers, but then when a matchmaker finds someone to go out with their client, that person obviously doesn't pay anything. So it was to kind of started as a way to connect my friends with an alternative to online dating that they didn't have to pay for, and to help out my friends who are matchmakers find dates for their clients, and just kind of grew from there.
How do you find those people? Like, are these like all your friends, or are you actually like actively looking, or how does that work?
No, I'm actively looking. I don't have that big of a personal network. So a lot of it is social media. A lot of people come to me via social media. But a lot of it is really hands-on recruitment, just, like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, going to events, a little bit less now because of the, situation that we're in, but those types of things.
Okay. And so I was just thinking because I have used a matchmaker in the past.
Hmm.
So and I have worked in recruitment many years ago. So yeah, no, I cannot imagine what it's like to find like 50 dates because you have to really like 50 days per month. So that sounds like a lot, definitely. So have you found like a match for yourself, or are you always are you looking for everyone else but you?
It was like that for a long time, and I was single for 3 years after my last breakup. My last breakup was not really a bad breakup, like it was kind of a flash in the pan relationship. But I realized that kind of a lot of the mindset behind people who come to matchmakers is that they just want to find this person. And I realized that I was doing that as opposed to looking within and trying to figure out what I was doing wrong, because there's no such thing as like, oh, I just haven't met the right person. That's my least favorite thing when people say that. If you haven't met the right person, it's because you're not the right person yet. So I took 3 years to like really get my shit together, like financially, to start my business, to move to Mexico, to work on myself emotionally extremely intensely. I feel like I'm a completely different person than I was 3 years ago on a cellular level. And yeah, I just started dating again.
Yeah, I mean, like inner work is definitely super important. Whether it's inner work or therapy, whatever is that people want to use or call it, it's definitely like it's so important because like 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 you said, like it's not that you haven't met the right person, although I think sometimes you definitely met the wrong people, but it's more like that you are not the right person yet, right? Is that what you said? Like you're not the right person?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think definitely, I think whoever you are as a person, I feel like when we grow, we are not attracted to the same.
No, fuck that. Absolutely not.
Right, and that is why I think I feel like that's how I hear that when you say you're just not the right person yet. So if you're not the person you want to be, then you probably not going to meet the person you want to meet and be with them
No.
and go from there. Yeah, they're not going to
And you
want you
have,
either.
no, God, no. I mean, I was awful. I was so toxic and needy, and like my finances were a mess. And I was such a workaholic. But if you aren't meeting the right people, you need to get in there and figure out why. And it's not, I don't even like to say like, oh, like this is the wrong person, because they're the right person in that moment to show you the work that you still need to do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think definitely like I think the blaming mentality culture
Yeah.
is. I mean, that in itself is really unhealthy. I think. I mean, it's different if you have like I don't know, let's just like make a really random example, but enemy troops coming into your town and then they're like capturing everybody and putting everyone into cells. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's a bit hard to like break through a cement wall when you don't have the tools, but like anything else that's sort of like voluntarily you're out there meeting people, there's definitely a lack of of self-awareness and responsibility, accountability for the choices we make.
Accountability.
And so I feel like this is bringing on to like this post that I saw that you had on your Instagram that you posted. And let me just say, oh yeah, I have it here. So let me just say, because you called it, the first slide says, so many women are chasing bad boys when what they're really craving is a wild man. And then the next slide is basically two columns with bad boy, like some bullet points what a bad boy is, and the next column, what a wild man is. And I really love what you listed, and I want you to be the one speaking on this. But just before that, I feel like what you're referring in that in that post with the wild man and the bad boy, like those two columns, I feel that almost applies to like most scenarios of any gender, any orientation, because
Hmm.
it's really about human nature and psychology. Because even though I saw wild man, bad boy, I could easily see wild woman, bad girl, like it's just kind of, that's how I feel, or whatever you want to like, call yourself. But so that's just my little 2 cents on that. So please tell us, like, Isabella, what is the difference between a wild man and a bad boy?
Yeah. Well, to go back to your point first about gender, These are just archetypes that exist deep in the human psyche and in the collective psyche or unconscious, whatever you want to call it. So we have access to all of the archetypes within us, whether you identify as a man or a woman or, whatever the fuck you want to call yourself, like it's still within you. Mm-hmm. So you can be interacting with and calling upon these archetypes regardless. But specifically, the bad boy, I think almost all women go through a bad boy phase, right? Especially when we're younger. And I definitely think of it a lot because I went to Catholic school. So the bad boy is kind of the rebel without a cause. They're like, there's something sexy about them, and they tend to be very intelligent because they look at the situation we call society and they inherently know that something is amiss, right? And I think a lot of us have that sense that something is wrong and that these authorities that are trying to control our lives should not have any authority over us, and we should not be submitting to them. So the bad boy has that energy. The thing is that it's not developed into like the full conscious manhood. It's trapped in this very infantile stage of development. So the reason that I call them the rebel without a cause is because they're rebelling, and like we find that sexy, but they haven't really found their cause yet. They haven't like put their stake in the ground and said, this is what I stand for. And it takes a lot of inner work to get to that place. The bad boy will rebel up until the point that it's like seriously inconveniencing their life. Or there's also like the very destructive path of the bad boy who's just going to rebel and rebel and rebel without cause and end up in prison or a drug addict or whatever.
Can I just ask you about the rebel thing? So is it sort of like the mentality of like just always complaining but not trying to find a solution? It's like, it's easy to complain about the situation, but unless you're about to do something about it or do different. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's also, they often can't articulate what is wrong. So they're not necessarily the person who's like posting on Instagram complaining. You're not going to like often see them at a protest. It's more so that they just have this inner knowing that something is amiss, but they haven't reached the developmental stage to be able to clearly articulate it or to really like be solution oriented and create alternatives for themselves. They're definitely not standing up for other people.
So what would that be? So what would be the opposite? Like, because obviously the bad boy and the wild man. So the wild man is sort of like the one that's the healthy one. So what would the wild man do instead of like that rebelling thing? What's the counterpart?
Yeah, so there's kind of two stages. There's like the rebel with a cause that's rebelling against, like XYZ. And then there is the stage that's like surpasses rebellion, because rebellion is, if we were looking kind of at energetics and spiritual principles, like rebellion is still fighting against something. And the more you fight against something, the more energy you give it. So you can think of, like one expression of the wild man is like this hermit archetype that lives in the woods by himself. Like he's totally exited society and is creating something new. Like a hashtag that's going around right now a lot on social media is hashtag exit and build. So it's not about like fighting the system that we no longer want to be a part of. It's about leaving the system and building something new that's more aligned with our inner selves.
Yeah.
The wild man, is very in touch with the sacredness of life, with nature, very in touch with the divine, in the example that I used, although there's so many examples for us to talk about, is John the Baptist in the Bible. Whether you're Christian or not, the Bible is so fun to read, to explore these archetypes, because John the Baptist, he lives alone in nature. He doesn't give a fuck about society. Like he's wearing like some weird ass, like camel skin clothes. He eats locusts and honey. Like he's just doing his own thing and he doesn't give a shit. And he's so in his power that even this one man living alone in the desert, just like kind of casually teaching people about spirituality and like baptizing people, like attracts the attention of the king to the point where he has to send men to arrest him and bring him to his palace and ultimately execute him, because that's how powerful it is when you stand in your truth and you exit and build something new.
Well, yeah, I feel like we could actually have about like 10 different conversations just based on everything that you just said, right? It's like, I mean, it is really hard to, that's why it's hard to sometimes, especially in this society. I know we're going off tension, but it's like, especially in today's society, it's very hard for anyone to speak up. Like, I feel like it's very dualistic, very divisive. And yes, and if you are going to be in your truth and be different, a lot of people don't like it because they almost feel there's an attack to their own choices, their own lifestyle, when it's not. It's just like you just choosing to, to exit and build a different option, a different alternative. So yeah, I think like to have that sort of maturity, it takes a lot of maturity. I mean, yeah, I'm thinking of like this is just random, but I'm thinking, for example, Dave Chappelle. He doesn't live in New York. He doesn't live in the big buzz.
No.
This guy is.
He lives in Ohio.
Right, exactly. In a little bit. And I understand it. I'm like, I get it. And to me, that's like, wow, that's a real man to do that. He doesn't need to be in the hustle and the bustle. He doesn't need to, first of all. Anymore. He definitely does not need to. But even when he wasn't successful, when he wasn't a goat, that was earning money, he was still a goat, but he wasn't earning money the whole time. He still was, doing his thing. And he quite literally stepped off the bus and walked, when he left like millions on the table. It's like when you are going to be, there are certain things that, and I think maybe, obviously I've never met the guy, but I feel like maybe that's the kind of things that you see, even Ricky Gervais, for example, is another comic. I'm very much into comedy, but he's been with the same woman for decades. They were poor together, like, lived in a studio flat. And I don't know if it's maybe not. I mean, he was definitely, I think he was on what you call social welfare in the US, like benefits here. And now he lives in a house that's bigger than you can imagine. He's richer than you can think. And he's not out there trying to, he's all about his cat. On his social media and making fun of his I think it's his girlfriend. I don't think they're married, but yeah, they've been together for decades. And it's that kind of thing that's like, it's not about the bigger, the shinier object. And that's the syndrome, I think, of the bad boy and the bad girl.
Yeah, I love those two examples because, Dave Chappelle, it's like, of course he left millions of dollars on the table because the wild man knows that there's no price you can put on your soul or your peace of mind.
That's it.
And, like this recent thing that happened with Netflix, like he's not chasing Netflix to give him stand-up specials. They came to him. He's like, all right, I'll do it. People got pissed. He's like, I don't give a fuck. I don't need to apologize to you. I don't need to do anything. You don't need my approval either. Like, why do you need me to conform to your idea of how I should behave or how you want to be treated?
Exactly.
Or even not even treated really, because he's not like engaging with these people. Like these were just like people who worked at Netflix who like had a problem with him. And Ricky Gervais too, like, he's a good example, although he is an atheist and I don't know, like in the archetypal realm, it doesn't really matter that much, but his speech at the Golden Globes where he's just like, it's like in the Emperor's Wearing No Clothes type of situation. Like he's just like calling out all of these people for being fucking hypocrites. He's like, I don't care that you paid me to come here. I'm not going to get on this stage and kiss your ass just because like you paid me and you expect me to. Like, I don't give a shit if you never ask me to do this again. Like, I'm living my fucking life.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, there is this thing, it's something that I think we can all access. And I think it's one of those things that there is certain things that we know there's a line we don't want. It's too, it hurts too much to not stay. There's a limit, all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely compromise a lot. I mean, on a daily basis, we all have to, I mean, I say we all have to. We probably don't. That's just my reality. But like, I compromise on things, right? But there's certain things where it's like, whoa, no, like, because I'm like, I'm in my I have a day job, right, full time. Honestly, I don't know if I have a job on Monday. because I didn't put up with, there was something, he just went way too far and I called him out on it and I said, really calm. And he did not expect that. But it was that thing. And I'm not saying I'm a wild woman, but I'm just saying like, I understand that feeling of, wow, I don't care how much you pay me. Like that, I would rather be broke than me. I'm not here to how do you call it? I'm here to not here to indulge your crazy. Like, I'm not co-signing on this. And this is, like when people are just not respectful and they're crossing boundaries and they think you're going to bend even more. No, 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 no. And yeah, so I think there's certain things that don't have a price. You can't pay that.
No.
You can buy that. Okay, so I'm just stepping out of the episode for a minute. If you like what I'm doing and you want to have your own podcast too, I actually teach this stuff and I absolutely love doing it because podcasting has been such an incredible experience for me. My favorite parts have been being able to just be myself, connecting with fascinating guests from all walks of life, connecting with you as well, engaging with you. It has been really an amazing experience. And so I am beyond excited to be able to help you create your own mark in the world through podcasting by showing you how to do it. So to get the details on how to sign up, just go to learnpodcasting.online. I will add the link in the show notes and I really hope to see you there. So now back onto the episode. So to go back to the wild man and bad boy, I'm gonna try and shut up. I'm gonna let you speak. And can you just you mentioned about the rebellion, right? And then of the bad boy, and then how it then the reciprocal for the wild man. What are the other things that are the bad boy characteristics that you talk about?
So if you think about the bad boy as someone with a disturbance in his soul, because he is feeling this disturbance in the force type of situation of something is off, but he can't articulate it. He can't put his finger directly on it. Sometimes they go down these weird rabbit holes. I used to live really close to Tulum and I met a lot of bad boys who were involved in all of these weird, spiritual movements and sexual communities, because
where was that?
That was in Tulum.
Tulum?
In Tulum, yeah.
Where's that?
In Mexico. Okay, sorry. Okay. So Tulum is this new age town, basically, in Mexico, on the beach. So it's heavy new age vibes, but there's a real dark side to it. There's even a documentary called The Dark Side of Tulum, because there's a lot of cult-like behavior. Women are getting sexually abused at ayahuasca ceremonies. The jungle's being destroyed by all these raves. So that to me is so much the bad boy. They're looking for something. They know something's not right. They're looking for something, but they take an escapist approach that ends up blowing up in their face, right?
And that's where all the poly-open relationship stuff that you talk about in that.
Yeah. So that, you can't live in Tulum without running into some guy who thinks he's a yoga guru and wants you to have sex with his 7 girlfriends. But, the poly thing, it's not for me. I think that I've been in an open relationship and I found it to be very draining of my emotional resources, as opposed to, I would rather put all of my emotional resources into building something with one person. So that's not to say that, ultimately people's sex lives are their business. I really don't give a shit. But what I'm trying to say with the post, a lot of these men are seeking counterculture movements without doing the inner work to figure out what it is that they actually want, what it is that they actually don't agree with. And something that is really key to the wild man is a sense of devotion. So it's devotion to God, devotion to their vision of a better future. And sometimes it's devotion to a woman. So you're not, maybe sometimes the wild man likes to go to fucking orgies or have threesomes, but you're not often going to see a wild man who's in a committed, devoted relationship also on Tinder looking for other women.
Yeah. But that, again, that comes with wisdom, right? I think that I feel if you if I'm in a phase of wanting to date, which I am not now, but if I'm in a phase of wanting to date, then it is fun to go out on dates and you may be going for dinners and you dress up and you go someplace new and you meet someone, you're learning new things about someone new and all of this stuff. But effectively, personally, like I've always, like, that's how I feel, is like, I don't need 100 men. I just need one. Like, I just want one.
Yeah.
And because that's going to be plenty. I don't know how people deal with poly, because I mean, that's a whole project management situation that I'm not prepared to do. I am way too lazy for that crap.
Like project management software to keep track of everyone.
Exactly. It's exhausting. And look, like when you were saying about, I didn't know about Tulum, but I've been on Koh Phangan and I've been in yoga tantric societies as well. And now I had a good experience, but I know there's definitely a dark side to it.
Yeah.
And they got very exposed. I mean, you may have heard about Agama.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah. So, and, but it is like, some of them, you can tell they read something, or they went to we're going to call it a class. Went to a class, or they listened to someone speak and stuff. And they think, oh yeah, to be a wild man, I have to have like, because it's really hot out there, I'm just going to just take off my shirt. I have to be like, always naked up top, and I have to sit in a certain way. And it's all just, it's not internalized.
I have to have a man bun.
Bun for sure. Yeah, man bun. Yes, why not? Absolutely. Yes. But there are obviously poly couples who are poly. But the thing is that people think that people who are, they are in a, they're like a triple or quadruple, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have more sex. They have definitely more conversations. Like, I remember I had a friend, she was like the third one in this couple, and she was like, oh my God, I have never, ever, like, this was so intense. The amount of like conversations, we had to talk everything through. And she was like, all they did was talk. And she was just like, she was exhausted. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I can imagine, because just with one person is complex, never mind someone else coming in. So look, maybe some people can do it well and it's very healthy. Good for you. You got to, do your thing. But it's like, I think what people forget, they think that they have to in order to be spiritual. They feel that it's to do with that. You cannot be attached, the whole, and it's like, but you may think that you're not attached, but you're either attached to, you're completely avoidant, or you're actually attached to several people at once, and it's making it like a head fuck for you. And it's so, so I want to go into like that. If you don't mind, I'm just going to read out loud that post, because I want to sort of almost like have this like really ego view summary that you put up, which I thought was really great. And so there's a bad boy, wild man. And so the bad boy is attracted to self-destructive women, and the wild man is attracted to wild, authentic, disobedient women. So can you talk about what is a disobedient woman? Because what is it for you? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's so hard to express these energetic things into language. So, disobedient to me, again, I think Ricky Gervais is a great example. Like, he's just doing his fucking life. He doesn't give a shit that it violates cultural norms for him to get on the stage and be like, I'm not going to kiss your fucking ass in an award ceremony. So it's just, I guess, like a woman who has done the work to know what her authentic truth is and is not going to compromise on that to satisfy her parents or society or a sign at the shopping mall. Like, I had an ex, he was more of a bad boy, but I remember like he just crossed the street one day without waiting at the cross sign. And I was like, oh my God, that's so hot. Because it was like, there were no fucking cars coming. Like, why am I going to sit here and obey this random sign when there's no logical reason for me to do that other than I'm told I'm supposed to be obedient?
Yeah. Well, you just said a mouthful, because we are in 2021. But it's true. It's like, but I feel like maybe like the disobedient woman, she may be, like she may have, she will do what she wants, but it's not because it is to act out, to act up, or to or be, and it's definitely not to people please, right? Because I think maybe when we said, when I read like when a bad boy is attracted to self-destructive women, a self-destructive woman will most likely people please.
Yeah.
Because it's very destructive to be sleeping with someone when you're not ready yet. You're not there yet. You're not really wanting them inside of you. You don't want to be hosting that kind of party yet. And you're still doing it because you think that you're being sex positive, right? And it's a very different, I think, what I read when I saw those two lines, like, the self-destructive woman and the disobedient woman. A disobedient woman, if she wants to sleep with 10 men in 1 month because she wants to, she's really horny and she's really enjoying it, she will do it. And she's feeling great about it. But a self-destructive woman may do the same. So the behavior looks the same, but it's coming from a different place. She's like, oh, which one's going to like me? Which one's going to like me? Or, or how can I fuck myself up a little bit more, just like with drinking and smoking and all of that stuff, right? So I feel that's where the difference is. It's not so much in what we see on the outside, is where it's coming from within. And people can feel that. There's nothing more uncomfortable than doing something for you because they're wanting to please you. It's people pleasing. It's not coming from an empowered place. It almost feels really icky. And that's why the self-destructive woman, I feel, if she goes out and sleep with loads of guys, same amount of guys that the other woman, they're not going to want to see her again because it is icky. And she's attracting icky characters.
Yeah. And the thing is, with the wild woman, she also doesn't need to sleep with 10 men if she's horny, because she knows her own body and she can take care of her own pleasure. So it's like, why, like, I don't need to bring, and also there's like a sacredness to preserving your energy field. Right. So it's like, she's only going to let the wild man in once he's proven that he's like at her level, because her energy is sacred. Her body is a temple. She has no needs of other people. She doesn't need emotional validation. She doesn't need sexual pleasure coming from someone else. Mm-hmm. And not only is she like disobedient to these external power structures, but she's not going to be obedient in the relationship either. She's not going to do things just to make you happy. And, like, especially in the new age community, we see these kind of like fake wild men who have like the muscles and the tribal tattoos and the man bun. And almost every time they're dating a woman who's like obviously really into them because they're like very sexy, like bad boys are sexy. Mm-hmm. And she's like trying to contort herself into the image of like his wild woman and without doing the inner work. So like, they're trying to look the part of wildness without having that within them. And like, you can be a wild woman in corporate America and wear like a pencil skirt and a button up. You don't need to be in the jungle somewhere fucking some guy with a man bun.
Right. No, exactly. Definitely. And then the second point in that one is the bad boy has avoidant attachment and sabotages intimacy, whereas the wild man, he wants to see and hold all of you.
Yeah, so the bad boy hasn't figured out what it is that is uncomfortable in his soul yet. Like I said, there's a disturbance in the force, but he doesn't know what it is. So when you haven't seen yourself fully, you're always going to avoid intimacy because you don't know what's in there. You don't want someone else to see it. If you can't see yourself, if you haven't done that extremely challenging inner work of going into your own underworld and doing the shadow work, you're always going to avoid intimacy and be afraid of being seen and also of seeing other people. So that's why the bad boy is avoidant, and that is why he'll always sabotage intimacy. So that might be him saying that he's poly when in fact he's very avoidant. That's just an excuse to continue his avoidant patterns because he's not investing all of his sexual, emotional, spiritual energy into one woman. But he's giving her the short end of the stick and spreading it out amongst other people because monogamy, and it's why a lot of people aren't suited for monogamy. You have to be willing to see yourself and the other person in many different forms.
And monogamy is not easy.
No. And it's, people act like it's like this thing we're forced to do when in fact, that it's like a backwards thing and you're more spiritual if you're poly. But in reality, monogamy is probably the most difficult spiritual journey you can take yourself on. And like you said, like you don't need 100 men, you just need one. Like in that one man is 100 men that you'll have to learn about and fall in love with over the course of a lifetime.
And that's real, I feel, elevation. And the reason why I say that is because I haven't been able to do that. Like, I know it's difficult. I really know, I know, I think it's, like, I understand the sabotaging intimacy. I understand the whole, because intimacy is very, it's really, I know like I'm out here and I'm, and I like to have a bit of a giggle with the like, the bad boy, wild
Mm-hmm.
man, bad girl, wild woman. But the reason why it resonates is because I understand it, like what it's like to not being able to sit and hold the pose and just
Yeah.
be there. And the thing is, sometimes you may be there and hold the pose, but you've attracted that person who's not going to. And thereby you feel that, oh, well, it's never working out. So it's almost like I think there's like an unconscious thing that goes in. It's like where, well, you meet someone and you think it's gonna be long term, and you are gonna be committed and stuff, and then they bounce and you go, what? There, you see, every time I fall for someone and they go, and it's like, and it's like, it's almost that, how do you call it, that self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think there's something in the unconscious that's going, do you know what, let's I'm going to prove myself that I'm right, that people are not going to
Yeah.
stay, right? So it is something that it's a self-manifestation a little bit. It's not like to, I mean, I'm talking about me, so I don't care. Like, you can tell people want to say, like, you're blaming, whatever. But it's, I think it's something definitely, like, I know that I am the common denominator when things don't work out or when things happen. And it's like, it's so much easier to be single for me. So I understand that, like, it's not easy to, what on the wild man, it says like the opposite is to wants to see and hold all of you. That's a
Mm-hmm.
very scary place to be
Yeah.
receiving that. It's not easy to receive that. Like,
No,
it's
fuck
a
that.
lot. It's a lot to receive. And so I don't know how, you talked about inner work and stuff. And I don't know if maybe now is the time, because obviously I also want to go over some of the other points that you took in there. But
Mhm.
like, how would you say, like, is this something that's quite common? Obviously I know I'm not the only one. I know a lot of people out there
Yeah.
like, struggling with that. But how do we, yeah, like, we need to transcend that. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, we do have to transcend it because we are in a moment in the collective where like we really have a lot of shit to do and a lot of people are not doing the shit. Um, and as far as, like if you're still drawing, even if you're like, hey, I'm here, I'm ready for intimacy, but you're still drawing in men who leave,
mm-hmm.
there's kind of like two major reasons. One, anytime you say always or never, it kind of like wakes up your ego and your ego wants to prove you correct because the ego loves nothing more than being right. So if you're like, oh, if you say men always leave, your
Uh-huh.
ego is going to call in men that are always going to leave because your ego wants to be right.
No wonder I like to be single, right? Because don't want to be doing that Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And another really common one is just that your inner child is completely overburdened and can't fathom the possibility of bringing in another person with their emotional burdens in. So, what I mean is, like, if you have a lot of trauma in your childhood, or maybe like as a child, you never felt seen or heard. Well, first of all, intimacy is going to feel completely unsafe to your psyche because it's not something you're familiar with. But also, your inner child is still carrying those burdens, especially if you had a dysfunctional home or a parent that was codependent with you or enmeshed, or something that we call emotional incest. So, parents sometimes treating their child like their partner, like unloading all of their problems onto them. Your inner child is completely overburdened and doesn't want to bring anything else in that could exhaust it further. So as far as the inner work, things that I really like, I love hypnotherapy because like if you find a good hypnotherapist, you can get right into working with these archetypes, working with these different aspects of yourself, deep into the subconscious and letting things out. I really loved my hypnotherapist because we did a combination of work with these aspects of myself, trauma work, and past life regression work.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt that it was like really attacking the issues on all fronts. I love flower essences. So those are Bach flower remedies. People in the UK might be a little more familiar with those, but I like Alexa Smart. That's where I order mine from. And those kind of like help to release these big blockages on an energetic level. So sometimes you don't even need to figure out what the blockage is, just kind of like letting it go energetically. And I like the To Be Magnetic work, which is an online platform for subconscious reprogramming that I have found to be extremely effective.
It's called To Be Magnetic.
Yes.
Oh right, okay. Well, I didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I'm not, I'm a big believer in therapy. I mean, I did like
Mm-hmm.
CBT last year, and it honestly it was so incredible. Like like that feeling of peace that
Mm-hmm.
I feel, and obviously sometimes it gets disturbed and stuff like that, but like this new level of peace, and I had to really look within, and I've been doing different things for a while and stuff, and like it does really help on a daily basis. Whether how it's going to be like in relationship, I don't know, because we didn't work about relationship, but on that thing. But I think, yeah, I really love that what you talked about, like and what because you talk about inner work, and the things that you can do, and I think that's definitely important. And there's another thing that in that post that you wrote. So the bad boy uses it says intelligence as a weapon, and the
Mm-hmm.
wild man is embodied wisdom. So I want to ask you first, like, what do you mean by intelligence as a weapon?
Yeah, so intelligence without wisdom is dangerous. So look at society now. We're creating all of these incredible technologies, and we don't
Uh-huh.
have the embodied wisdom to use them appropriately
Mm.
or really have a sustainable relationship with technology. Like it, from one perspective, humanity is on the fast track to extinction because of what
Yeah.
we're doing with technology. And there's nothing inherently wrong with technology. It's just we're not spiritually developing fast enough to be able to handle it. The intelligence as a weapon. So bad boys are very intelligent typically. That's something that makes them sexy. And, they have to be somewhat intelligent to sense that something just isn't working. Like, for example, the stereotypical like boy in Catholic school who's like rebelling and smoking cigarettes in the bathroom, like he obviously senses that there's something wrong with this authority structure. Um, that where it comes in as a weapon is because they use it as an avoidance mechanism. So as a way to avoid intimacy and to create distance in a relationship. So for example, a bad boy might be super hyper perceptive of you. He might be able to analyze you and study you, learn a lot about you. But instead of using that to create deeper intimacy, he will stockpile that information about you and take it out and use it to hurt you when he feels like too much intimacy has been created.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Like you could almost feel like you shouldn't give them too much information because you got to pay for it.
It's not a safe place. Like they have a very penetrating, like I'm sorry to keep bringing up the Bible, but it's
No,
just like
no, go right
it's
ahead.
such a
It's fine.
good
Yeah.
it's such a good example. Like Jesus had this very penetrating gaze where he could like look into a person, but it was like a penetration of love. Like he could like penetrate you and see all of you, and you felt like completely held and loved and seen and like with compassion. And like that's what we should all aim for. That like we can see each other clearly, but not with judgment, with compassion, because we're all human. We all have our shadows. The bad boy likewise has very penetrating gaze, but it's not with compassion. It's just like penetrating through you, analyzing you.
Yeah. And is it, and the would you say like the penetrating with love, is that the embodied wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, so the embodied wisdom is you take any information that you get through your own processing system. So if you hear something on the news, you can take that within and process it and say, okay, I don't think that's true, or you know what, that doesn't work for me, as opposed to just absorbing all information. Or, like a saying that I really love is common sense is fast, science is slow. So, the wild man isn't the kind of person to be like, well, I need to see a study to prove that. The wild man feels whether it's true or not in his body and trusts that and goes with that and doesn't need external validation.
Yeah. And what did you say that like something was fast? Was it common sense?
Common sense is fast, but science is slow.
Mm-hmm. how does that relate in this context?
Like, when you haven't developed your inner relationship with yourself, you haven't done the shadow work, haven't gone into your own underworld, it's hard to trust your own intuition and your own instincts and your own common sense. And you might wait for external validation, but a wild man or a wild woman isn't waiting for anyone to validate their reality.
But yes, okay, yes, no, yes, 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 I feel that. And there was something that was really like on the Bible column. It says fast talking, and again, I said bad boy. It could probably be like the bad girl as well. Because I feel like
Yeah.
those be the same characteristic, right? It doesn't matter. Like, I mean, you did actually say already. Like, it doesn't really matter which archetype you identify with or what gender you identify with. It's just those are just the characteristics. So let's say like on the bad bad column, it says I'm a fast talker. Anyway, fast talking, always on the move and grounded. You have to create the container. And on the wild side, it says grounded creates a safe container. You feel secure. So I understand what you mean by container, but could you explain it to the listeners?
It's like when you're with a man and he's so all over the place, like so inconsistent, maybe like like a digital nomad type guy, that you feel like you have to be the grounding presence or the thing is just going to go off the rails. A safe container, that the wild man creates is like, you can just be yourself. Like it's grounded, it's stable, it's safe. You can let your boundaries and your guards down. Like as women in modern society, we have a lot on our plates, right? Like we're all working full-time jobs. Like we're managing our own finances on top of like all the bullshit that it takes to already be a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So with the wild man, you can like put it down for a minute. Like he's got you. You can feel safe. You can relax. With the bad boy, it's so much chaos that you end up taking on even more, trying to create a grounded feeling within that relationship.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like you have to almost like rein him in and make sure like,
Yeah.
is he going to be here on time? Like I've just made dinner. Like is it stressful? I don't know. Is he going to be here or an hour late? And he doesn't tell you. Like it's very like, I mean, it is like that very cliche saying, but I do feel it's so true. Is like, if he likes you, if he doesn't, you'll be confused.
Yeah.
It really is that. And I think maybe, I don't know if it works the same the other way around as well, like for men and
Yes,
and
it
women.
does.
Yeah. So it really is like, and at least like someone who's, they may like you and you may feel confused, but if you still feel confused, it's probably because they're not emotionally mature yet. Or they're not at the level that you need them to be. So that's why it feels icky, because they may be behaving in a way you haven't thought you would never want to do that, or you would never, when it doesn't even enter your conscious mind, because for you that would be completely weird to do that to someone else. And that's maybe why sometimes it feels icky, I feel. And then the last bit was the bad side is possessive or completely how do you say it?
Disengaged. Disinterested.
Thank you, that one. There's no in between. And then on the wild side is protective. Now, I love that you've written possessive and protective as the mirror of each other, because other people say, controlling and stuff. And I think sometimes we also confuse a man who's protective with controlling, right? And so I wonder, could you talk into this about like how do we know if someone is being protective of you, especially a man, right? Because it's a bit of a different energy, I feel, to a man who's possessive and controlling you.
Yeah. So the possessive bad boy, obviously, he's very underdeveloped. So he sees you as an object. That's why you don't possess people, you possess objects. So he sees you as an object to bolster his ego. He will, with the bad boy, I think it's either like complete disinterest, like pretends like he just doesn't care. He's sleeping with lots of other people, or he can like swing back and forth like really wildly between being super possessive and totally disinterested. So he avoids intimacy, but he also doesn't want to lose you. So he will push you away. But then the moment that you start maybe seeing someone else, or like he sees someone else taking interest in you, that's when he'll become super possessive. So the key point is the objectification, because he's not treating you like a human, but an object to bolster his ego. Whereas the protective energy, it's very practical. Like women, I'm sorry, but like if me and Jason Momoa get in a fight, like one of us is not going to make it out of there. It's not going to be Jason Momoa. Like there's just a biological reality to being a woman that we are, in a sense, less safe. And that's just a fact. And I know women are going to be pissed about that, but like, I don't give a fuck. Like try fighting a man and let's talk about it. So it's like a guy that's aware of what it feels like, in a sense, to be a woman. So many men, it's a really underdeveloped boyish quality, don't realize that women feel unsafe almost all the time.
Right.
That like
right,
we can't like walk out of the grocery store to our car without being like, oh fuck, I hope I don't get raped. Or kidnapped.
Yeah.
So it's like the maturity of the man realizing like what is really happening inside the female psyche, and that like, if he's able to create a safe container for us and like take care of us, we will feel safer because of that. And it doesn't mean that we're weak. It's just like a reality. And when we feel protected and safe is when we can really open up sexually. And that's kind of my issue with the polyamory too, is like, I question that these people are reaching the same sexual depths, because how are these like 7 different men all making you feel so deeply seen and safe and protected? Like, I really think it's unlikely. Yeah. And that's, for example, a guy asked me out on a date recently, and I live in Mexico, and he said, we can do whatever you want to do. You tell me what makes you feel safe, because I know it's uncomfortable meeting a man from the internet in a big city. Yeah. It's like, what a simple, easy way to like step into that masculine energy and communicate that like you respect women and understand what we go through.
Right.
There's no such thing as toxic masculinity. There's masculinity, and then there's a toxic lack of evolved masculinity. So I think when we talk about toxic masculinity, it's really damaging for women, because women internalize that there is a type of masculinity that's toxic, and therefore begin to unconsciously become afraid of all masculinity, when in reality, what we're really talking about is like this boyish, underdeveloped, like, same with like the bad boy and the wild man. We're talking about this like very infantile, undeveloped sense of self that's very ego-based and can therefore become violent, because a weak man is always going to have a bad relationship with his ego because he has low self-worth. Whereas like a strong man who's very firm in his masculine energy is going to make you feel safe. And when we look at like the US military, masculinity inherently is like supposed to be protective of women and children. That's one of its energetic functions.
Yeah, for sure.
And when we look at the military, like the US, I'm American, but like we can probably say for all like, hyper westernized democracy, quote unquote democracies. And they're engaging in like drone striking weddings and that kind of thing. That is obviously a perversion of what masculinity is supposed to be doing. There's lots of rape in the military. Obviously, this isn't to offend anyone who's in the military. I know there's amazing, protective, beautiful men there. But I just, instead of toxic masculinity, I just think like unevolved masculinity, or like just like a lack thereof. I just feel like women are going around carrying this like fear of masculinity. Yeah. And it's like, it's really damaging to our relationship with men, because they're like, I can't tell you how many clients I have who have like a deeply ingrained fear and hatred of masculinity, but also want a relationship with a man. And that's never going to work. And it's not masculinity that's toxic. It's a lack of masculinity that's toxic, because if these men evolved into true masculinity and manhood, they wouldn't have these toxic traits.
I think men in general, like regardless of anything, men actually do they really want to protect and serve, whether that is children, women, it doesn't matter. Like they really, I think when they are in that, like innately, that's what they want. And I think yeah, you're right. We have to be careful not to spread the fear of men, right? But I feel like it's one of the things that like you don't know until you know that that is a thing, right? So it's like some people are born in that environment, others aren't. And I think, yeah, it's definitely important to have more men example, like male example. There's tons of them around. There's like millions of them around who actually are really good and want to protect and serve. And the last thing they want to see is a woman, a child, or another man being hurt, that's that. But that is to do with, like, based on someone who's evolved and someone who actually is in touch with their soul and is a human being that actually can have compassion
and in touch with their masculine energy, because we're not living in a culture that is teaching men to be masculine, and we're also living in a culture that shames men for being masculine. We no longer have like brotherhoods for men to be a part of and learn from each other. We have a lot of fatherless homes. There aren't like rites of passage that men go through to, like, that we used to have in indigenous societies for men to like for boys to transition into manhood. So that's why we're seeing like 45-year-old men who are still like trapped in like boyish archetypes and boyish mindsets. And we also have this like backlash against what I guess we could call the patriarchy, though I don't really like that word, but like we have this like really strong backlash that, of course started in good reason, but has grown maybe like cancerously to just be shaming men.
Yeah. But I think we also a bit also out of touch for us women is also that we are not, when we are out there, like we talked about, we work full time and things like that. And there are times like where we don't always we're not necessarily able, or we are able, but I think we get very drained if we go at the same rhythm as a typical guy, because we have all these hormonal changes, like we have 4 cycles in the months, like there's 4 different times. It's a lot. And sometimes it's also like we just have different needs and we're trying to almost make everyone the same and being like homogenous. And there's this lack of acknowledgement that we are different. I mean, even you and me, we're gonna have differences. We probably have a slightly different, we have different health and different ages and things like that. And there are gonna be different things that light us up and different things. But yeah, it's almost like I feel like we are one, but we also have to acknowledge our differences, and our differences are beautiful, actually. I'm happy that a man is different to me. I'm happy that I'm different to a man. Do you know what I mean? Like there's nothing wrong with that, but we almost say, we can all do the same thing all the time. And it's like, yeah, there are variations, yeah.
No, we definitely can't do everything all the time. And we have different functions biologically and different needs. So when I try to force myself to be in this masculine mindset of like work and, et cetera, I will burn out my adrenals. I will miss my period, so
that's it.
You have to be able to step outside of this track that we're put on and create something that works better for you.
Isabella, is there anything that you would is there anything that you'd like to leave the listeners with? Is there anything else that you'd like to add and share with us before we round up?
If you find that you're listening to this or anything else and you're feeling like quote unquote triggered by it, that's typically your ego. And that's not like a reason to shut down the conversation within you, or like whatever this is bringing up, or anything that you're listening to that it's bringing up triggers. That's an invitation to explore it further, to find what's really true for you, as opposed to what you've been conditioned to believe is true, either by the media or the news or schooling or whatever. Yes. So I would just encourage everyone to go on their inner journey, do the shadow work, question everything they're told by everyone, and especially the news. Turn off the news if you can. And yeah, just like explore within before you start trying to find a relationship, or before you think that you have the answers to everything. If at any point in your life you think you know something for sure, that's a good time to explore it more deeply.
Yeah. And that is definitely, like, I love that message with the triggers. That's definitely something that, that's definitely like a theme on the podcast, is that, like because we see that so much, like online, like people are just, it's like a trigger fest and people are just like lashing out instead of actually taking it as an opportunity, like you said, to go, oh wait, that's actually something that I need to clear in me, like that's free therapy. When you're being triggered, it's free therapy. You have to sit with the discomfort. It's not easy. I don't like being triggered either, it's not comfortable. But yeah, instead of that, people are just out there trying to get validation so that they don't feel that discomfort of being triggered. They just want a validation, and they want other people to co-sign and to, and it's very like, yeah, definitely, like, just turn off the news as well, like that. Yeah. So Isabella, I'm going to ask you the 2 finishing thoughts that I ask all of my guests. And the first one is, what do you wish you'd realized when you were 18? And by that, I mean, not in your mind, but really on a cellular level. What did you wish that you really, like, really deeply knew at 18?
Yeah, I mean, at 18, I definitely knew that, like, there was something deeply wrong with our society. I didn't exactly know what it was, but because there weren't as many people speaking about these issues. I don't think podcasts were a thing back then. Like, there was just like no community to find. I internalized it as there was something inherently wrong with me. So I wish I had known that there was nothing wrong with me. I was just perceiving the bullshit of our society.
And the second one is, what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
Yeah, I don't put up with people treating me like a convenience. So people who are like constantly canceling plans or like only want to be in my energy when they need something from me, like that is canceled. And I'm not putting up with men who I have more upper body strength than.
That is such a good detail. I love it. So if they have less, if you have more body strength than them, if you have more upper body strength than them, that's it.
Yeah, it's fucking gross. Go to the gym, like throw a ball. I don't know. Like, I'm not even that strong, but I do pole dance. Yeah. And I just I don't want to be in bed with someone who I feel like I could beat up.
No, I do want to do some pole dancing classes. I did some when I was in Australia many years ago, and it was so hard though. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But it's so good for you. And I do want to get back into it. Absolutely. I say get back into it as if I was really doing it. I did like 6 weeks and that was it. But I was really impressed with it. I was like, wow, this is like, and I do follow some accounts, and it's like, it looks like they're flying.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Some of them is like, wow. So Isabella, please tell us, where can we find you? How can people work with you? Give us all the good stuff.
Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram. That's kind of where the party's at. I'm at Izzy Living. So ISSY Living, LIVING. And my website is the same, izzyliving.co. And that's where you can join my international matchmaking database. So to be a potential match for one of the clients of the matchmakers that I work with. And it's also where I do a little bit of coaching. I limit the clients I take just because I don't like to get into the coaching industry that feels like multi-level marketing. So I keep it all really fair pricing, just if you want to go a little bit deeper on any of these topics.
And is to be a matchmaking client, is that did you say international?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Isabella. I really encourage everyone to go and check out Isabella's Instagram, her website. It has been really, really great to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for being open with me and taking this time with me. This has been really lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram at Tool for This Shit Podcast. See you next week, and until then,
using health inappropriately.